I hadn't thought of starting my own gallery actually. We encourage very much where you'll have a more established artist, really being generous and having younger artists visiting their studios, engaging. That does happen a lot within the gallery. It's the artists feel like a family and very supportive of one another. Either you were a Western gallery that kind of mainly focused on artists from the US or from Europe, and then there were these regions. It was artists from Brazil, artists from South Africa, artists from. It just didn't make sense to me that they were kind of being viewed in such isolated, narrow ways. There was a bigger conversation to be had. I don't think it's a good thing to show an artist every year. I actually think artists need time to make work, to think about work. I think the artist needs to be left in the studio to be able to really make a body of work, think about a body of work that kind of moves the discussion forward, that moves the practice forward.
Liza Essers, bonjour. I'm really happy to welcome you today for a conversation on the art market. How are you doing?
Hi, Vera. Thank you. Lovely to see you. I'm great in Cape Town and looking forward to our conversation.
Great. I must say I'm really honored to have this conversation with you because you're very committed gallerists and you influenced the art world for real. What I mean is that you support a vision of art that can really bring social change. In 2012, if I'm correct, you resisted political pressures and didn't censor your program, showing that art can be really political. Your gallery also supports a number of NGOs, demonstrating that for-profit organization can have social responsibilities. And under your leadership since 2008, the Goodman Gallery has brought South African artists, but also artists from the global south to the center of the art market, especially to Art Basel. So I have obviously a lot of questions for you. I'm a very curious person, but maybe if we should start with the beginning. You explained many times your journey to the art world, but as it's very unconventional, I think, would you mind briefly describing moments where you took turns in your career and how it influenced the person that you are today?
Sure, Vera. Okay, so I have a background in economics, and I started my career as a strategy consultant for the big firm Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, and then moved on to private equity, where there was a specific focus on technology, actually, and got to the age of 29 and thought, my goodness, my passion is the art. I was really engaged with the visual arts and walking into gallery spaces as well as films. And I decided to take the leap and go back and study art history and follow my passion, which was filmmaking and still is filmmaking and contemporary art. But I understood after making a film, which won an Oscar, that in fact, really through that journey, while working in parallel on a number of art projects, that I was most interested in documentary filmmaking. And I saw that documentary filmmaking and contemporary art really could be the same thing, except a different expression, especially when one is privileged to work with artists who are interested in important questions, philosophy, social change, the human condition. So I decided to pursue a career in contemporary art and in the art world after working as an independent filmmaker and curator for a few years. And then, the rest is history. I had been working with Linda Goodman, who owned the gallery prior to me. We had worked on some projects together, and she specifically a big project related to 10 years of democracy in South Africa in 2004, which was a show I put on in London. And she called me in one day and asked whether I might be interested in taking over her gallery. I had also at the time been working on a documentary, which was William Kentridge and Marlene Dumas in conversation. So it was kind of this pivotal moment where things came together for me. I have been privileged to be the owner and director of Goodman for the last 17 years.
Congratulations. And I'm curious, why did you pick finance in the beginning?
Um, I suppose it was really my parents.
Okay.
My mom kind of insisting that I, take a career in either finance or become a doctor or a lawyer. She was a refugee from Libya, and I am first generation born in South Africa. So I think it was very much kind of a mentality of doing something safe and secure, being a professional. But my dad was a musician, he was a jazz musician. And so there was also this huge side of me of really being drawn to the arts.
Obviously, you had this passion for one form of art and today focusing on visual art. It's unconventional also to take over a gallery if I'm looking at how it works in the art
Yes.
market. Did you think at some point of opening your own gallery? What was appealing in the fact of taking over a gallery? The gallery has a huge history, but it can be also more complicated to be true to the DNA of the gallery started by someone else?
I think that's an excellent question. I hadn't thought of starting my own gallery actually. I was working on independent projects as an independent curator and advisor, and it didn't occur to me to have my own gallery. I think this
The encounter, also the
was the
encounter with Linda.
encounter with Linda, with the former owner, and just with the projects, and it evolved naturally. I think she felt that yes, in a lot of ways, I was very privileged. She asked me if I would be prepared to take over her gallery.
How is it working when you take over a gallery? Do you write down a vision on how where you want to bring the company, the gallery in the next year? As a finance specialist, did you build a business plan? Like how is it working on the business side of the art
I
market?
think it evolved. I can't, I mean, I was so young. I was 33. So I had really very little experience. I think that it evolved, and I think that I followed my intuition, and I really just stayed true to what I believed in and what my essence was. And I think that my own personal queries and questions and identity is what shaped the gallery, in terms of my questions around economics and social change.
Yeah, but you didn't write a vision or like where do you bring the company in 10 years? That's not
No,
how it worked.
no.
Okay.
It's not how it worked, but there were also pivotal moments along the journey that kind of, I remember walking, going to the Havana Biennale before I bought the gallery, and being at the Sao Paulo Biennale, you know, in the early days, and kind of seeing the connections. At that stage, the art world was very much, it was very regional. It was South African artists and Chinese artists and Brazilian artists. And I remember feeling incredibly like that can't be. And it was just really clear to me that to try and shift the art world away from this very regional focused, either you were a Western gallery that kind of mainly focused on artists from the US or from Europe. And that was really what we saw. And then there were these regions, it was artists from Brazil, or artists from South Africa, or artists from and it just didn't make sense to me because we are one humanity and we have a shared history, and the human condition is the same, and colonial histories are evident, and history keeps repeating itself across the world in terms of,
Unfortunately, yes.
unfortunately. I was really interested in trying to create that discourse around the African context, looking at artists, African American artists, and looking at them in relation to the African context. The global South, shared histories with countries like Brazil and Latin America, and expanding that to India and other countries where it just didn't make sense to me that they were kind of being viewed in such isolated, narrow ways. There was a bigger conversation to be had. And so that is really what started to shape the program from the minute I took over.
Very interesting. So that's a bit your your program, or the legacy you want to have for the gallery is about unifying the global south and bringing them visibility and bringing them into the more Western Europe art market, let's say. Very
Definitely.
interesting. Very
Definitely.
interesting. Now, as I want to demystify the art market with this podcast for an audience, and I believe still, if probably artists think they know what the job of a gallerist is, still I think it's important to ask you to better understand the role of a gallerist from a gallerist words. And I've heard in interviews that you love welcoming school kids in the gallery and that you love their questions. And one of the questions I always ask to the interview is how would you explain your job to a kid? So how do you explain your job, your everyday job to the kids that are visiting the gallery?
Good question. So I think my role is split between artists on the one hand and audiences on the other hand. With the artist, it's always about a studio conversation, talking about the work, and that's the most important thing. And definitely the part that I enjoy the most about my job is working in the studio with the artists. That is certainly very personally rewarding and enriching, and I feel very blessed to have that space. It's also about long-term career strategy for that artist and building institutional partnerships so that that artist's work can be seen in museums around the world and the work can be collected by major institutions around the world. And then I guess on the other hand, it's collectors, and it's bringing visibility of the work to the collectors, nurturing the collectors. Then it's thinking about what makes sense across all the various platforms, whether it's the art fairs or the physical locations in London or Johannesburg or New York, or a particular art fair like Singapore. And so I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
But you also have big team now, so I guess you spend also time managing the team. You have different locations. How do you manage all that?
So that is tough because I think managing people or managing output of a team is very different to actually being able to work with collectors in one on one or work with artists one on one.
Sure.
And so it's been really important to build a leadership team and to build a team, which is a work in progress of people with shared value systems, shared vision, shared work ethic that feel as passionate about what we're doing and see the importance of the gallery and what the gallery is doing. But I have more recently brought in a COO and an MD and an FD. So really trying to professionalize things. Although we'll see how that goes. It's a very interesting business, the gallery world, because in a lot of ways it does require a big personal touch on a lot of things, especially on the key relationships, such as with the artists and the key clients and the key curators. Got the most incredible partner in London, Joe, who runs the London Gallery. And so, one is blessed when one finds people that one can work with. The team is always the success of the gallery.
For sure. And as an entrepreneur, do you because it's an entrepreneurial job running a gallery, even though, as you mentioned, you need to have like personal touch on various topics, which might not be exactly the same in the type of business that I'm familiar with. But do you, as an entrepreneur, then try to surround yourself with peers in the art world, like a bit of a personal board that you can call when you have questions or when you're unsure before taking a decision? Is it something that can happen in the art world, or you do that more with business people?
A bit of both, actually. So I have made some really good friends and have some great colleagues in the art world that where we can have an honest conversation, and I can pick up the phone and call them, and we can speak about issues that are much more particular to the actual art market or the art world or an artist issue. And then in the business world, I also have mentors that I can chat to as well.
And is it something that you encourage also artists to do in your gallery? Do you encourage them to surround themselves with other artists, challenge? Because I think art is so personal and an artist can feel subjective about their art. But is it something that you would encourage your artists to do?
We do very much. I think that we kind of see the gallery as a family, and the artists see the gallery as a family. So we encourage very much where you'll have a more established artist, really being generous and having younger artists visiting their studios, engaging. Alfredo Jarre, William Kentridge, have all been incredibly kind and supportive, or like a more established painter, speaking to an up and coming painter, doing a studio visit. So that does happen a lot within the gallery. It's the artists feel like a family and very supportive of one another, which I think is unique actually in our gallery.
Yeah, I think it's definitely unconventional also in your gallery that you encourage this link. Something also unconventional, like from my perspective, I have the impression that usually galleries are specializing in either emerging artists or more established artists, and that you really have a mix of both. And this is something that you stand out for. You say it's important. So can you explain a little bit why? But also, like, just even the words emerging artist and established artist, they are really complex words to understand were you not from the art world. If I was interested in having your definition on where to draw the line between the two. What is an emerging artist? What is an established artist? And why your gallery needs both?
I think an emerging artist for us, and it might be a different definition with other gallerists, is a young artist, not necessarily young, an up and coming artist that hasn't necessarily had the visibility, as much visibility from curators and collectors and institutions. An established artist would be someone who is in many, many museum collections, has had many museum shows, is exceptionally well known. There are books published on them, and critics have written about their work, curators have written about their work. So that, I would say, is the distinction between an emerging artist and an established artist. And then, of course, there's everything in between getting to that point from an emerging to an established artist.
There's a big gap.
Huge gap. And one, the energy and the effort and the time that one spends on each of those artists is different, and the kind of work that one has to do for an artist at each level of their career is different. I have felt that being where we are in South Africa, and, unfortunately, and I say this, there are not enough galleries on the African continent. I mean, that has improved hugely, and there are now many more galleries that are, at Basel and at Frieze from the continent. But I feel that it's important for us to keep on supporting the next generation of artists, because there are very few platforms for them. And I think it's interesting to see an intergenerational conversation, actually, because art and contemporary art is really a reflection of a particular moment in time in history. And I think the established artists really enjoy often speaking to the younger artists to get their perception and of what's going on the ground, of what are the real burning issues today, and so I think it creates vibrancy and dialogue in a program.
And do they sometimes collaborate?
We've seen it, sure. We also have a program, by the way, in the gallery, which is not part of artists that are represented by the Goodman Gallery per se. We have represented artists, and then we have another platform called Working Title, where we select a young group of artists that really don't have significant visibility from curators or collectors, But we think, wow, there's something amazing, something exciting. It's like an incubator for young artists that we'll introduce them to curators, and we'll help to amplify their careers, give them their first solo shows, include them on group shows in the gallery. So at the moment, we have a show on in the Cape Town Gallery, for example, with many established artists from our program, including William Kentridge or Pamela Sundstrom, Laura Lima, and then one of the young artists from our working title program, Unati, who's on the show with them. But I really believe in him, and I think that he's an interesting, exciting artist. And we may not go on to represent those young artists in working title, but there are artists that the curatorial team has identified and who for a year they're with the gallery, and we're promoting their careers and doing everything to ensure that they get the visibility that we believe they deserve.
Great. That goes well with one question I had from an artist, because I always ask one artist to give me one or two questions from my guest speakers.
Oh, great.
And obviously, the artist was interested in how do you choose to work with one artist? How does it happen? And concrete example on how you meet them. So if I understand, this platform is a way to identify artists, but your curatorial team is always looking for new artists, really for artists to understand how it happens when your team discovers something of interest and then the process.
So we have a curatorial team, and we are continuously looking at the biennales, at art fairs, at someone might go and see something, and then we'll meet and we have a list, and we'll then decide, okay, we really are interested in this artist, and we might include them on a group show, or think about doing a solo show before representation. Working title is specifically for South African artists. So
Okay.
that doesn't cover, for example, how we might engage with other artists that we're looking to sign or work with. Okay. Yeah, it's an ongoing process. It requires a bit of luck as well, being able to get access to that artist. Often you'll get blocked along the way. So it's always helpful when you're able to get into the studio yourself and have a personal connection.
So they are artists that you discover rather at fairs or that are already represented by potentially
galleries, or that they're on biennales, or just because they're on a museum show and you see something and you sort of very, taken, or you think that it, would be interesting to think about for our program. We're constantly looking at art, and I think that's the beauty of our profession.
For sure. And just because I know artists are often emailing galleries with their portfolios and trying to get some time or eye time from the people working in the gallery. So you would say this is not the way you discover artists. This is usually your team usually discovers artists by going to exhibitions and seeing the work.
Yes, for the most part. But also, it is extremely difficult for artists. Sometimes it's we have seen great things on a PDF. It's not a personal thing. It's also, there's a capacity issue. So when a gallery is already representing 30, 40, 50 artists, it could be a great artist, but there's a capacity issue. The gallerists and galleries and the team can only work with so many artists, and so that is also a huge constraint. It's not necessarily about not wanting to take on another artist.
Yeah, bandwidth is key, and time. We
Unless
only
you're
have 24 hours.
at the Hauser and Worth level, where they've got 110 artists, but and they've got a big team and a very professional team. But that's a different scale.
That's a different scale for sure. I've been always curious to understand how you build the program of the exhibitions that you're going to run in your galleries, because when you have 30 artists, still you won't be able to show everyone every year, I guess. So is it because you're having these conversations in the studio regularly with the artists that you start understanding who you will show that here? How does it happen? Because how do you make sure that the 30 artists at some points get visibility?
Yes, I think it's a combination of talking to the artists and understanding what work they're making or planning. It's also about understanding what makes sense for that artist in terms of what might be a next show. One also has to consider the gallery and the gallery's position at that time. So we're actually doing fewer exhibitions at the moment because the cost of shipping and the cost of exhibitions is really become exorbitant since COVID. And we think that, having longer exhibitions is the way to go. People are not necessarily going into galleries in the same way in which they're used to for every exhibition opening. So it's a combination of things that need to make sense and come together. It's about what the artist is making and what's important for that artist's career that I think is at the forefront of the decision.
And does it happen that an artist is very angry because you cannot show them that here?
I don't think it's a good thing to show an artist every year. I think that
Okay.
I actually think artists need time to make work, to think about work. I don't think one is doing an artist a service by giving them a big exhibition every year. It becomes about the market and commerce. I think the artist needs to be left in the studio to be able to really make a body of work, think about a body of work that kind of moves the discussion forward, that moves the practice forward.
You were mentioning openings. Why are openings so important in a gallery, and how do you make do after all the years you've been working at the gallery, do you have a process to make a good opening? What's a good opening?
I think an opening needs to be catered for the particular artist and the particular artwork.
So no process because it changes all the time.
Well, one would discuss what makes sense exactly. It would be really important for this show to think about a conversation between the artist and another artist or a curator. I think one looks at the work and decides what's appropriate. Some artists are better in a smaller group with 6 or 8 people around a table for lunch and not a big fanfare opening. I also think that the big fanfare opening it's shifted. It used to be like that, but I think more personalized relationships, more considered activities in the gallery with collectors, with curators, I think are proving to be a lot more beneficial and more interesting and more fun, actually, rather than you have an opportunity to really engage with people and connect and have a good conversation.
So it's interesting because creating new format seems to be also part of the job that you're doing, inventing new forms of revealing
Yes.
the newer works. Interesting.
Yes. Sometimes it's a big reveal, but and a big opening.
And sometimes not.
Absolutely.
You expanded the gallery to the international markets, so you opened locations outside of South Africa. I was probably as an entrepreneur, I was wondering, how do you take the decision to open a new location? And how do you finance it? Is it a financial decision? Is it a bet? Were you like very anxious about it, or it was a very well thought decision? How did the decision happen, and then how did you make it happen?
First of all, I've self-funded. So for me, I've always been very risk averse to debt financing. So it was also a question of affordability. When could I afford to invest and build a space in London, for example, or New York? And I've tailored it to what I could afford and what was possible. So New York, we have a very modest space. It's a viewing room, office, and so you create a model that fits. You cut your cloth to suit your needs. That's important. You don't want to be in a situation where you're financially stretched as an entrepreneur. And I just always knew that I needed to open a gallery where the key markets are and where the key audiences are for art. And so it was on the agenda very early for me to open London. But it took from 2008 to when I took over the gallery to 2019. So it took 10, 11 years of owning the gallery before, I even took the step to open London. Although I knew from early on that I wanted to. I think I saw 200 spaces. And from a business perspective, you're looking at the numbers and how it would make sense and what the assumptions are that you're basing the business on in terms of costs and revenue, and could you make an impact with which artists, and would it be relevant to the art world? Taking advice, taking guidance from others before making the step. It's ultimately one goes with one's intuition.
So it wasn't the agenda, and once you could make the investment, you did it. That's
Yes, and found
survival.
the right space. So it took a year or 2 years to
It
find
took
the
a
right
year.
space.
Wow.
More to find the right space. Yeah. 2 years.
No, it's very important that you're saying it because indeed, location in retail is key. Did you find the team before?
Location came first in the London's instance, but before we opened the London Gallery and before we found the team. Yeah.
And how do you adapt your program depending on the locations? Is it because of the audience?
It
Do you
depends. So
adapt it?
well, yes, definitely. I mean, it depends. So there are certain artists that have representation by another gallery in a particular territory, and one has to be respectful of that. Yinka Shonabari is a good example. He's represented by Stephen Friedman in London, so we don't show his work in London. We also have a very good collaborative relationship with Stephen, and we'll end up doing things together. And I think that's collaboration is really important. But the program per se would be a combination, again, of established artists and emerging artists as well.
I was wondering whether you want to show artists from South Africa in your locations in New York and London and bring international artists in South Africa and then have these different programs, or do you still want to have local artists being shown locally?
Again, it's a combination. So it's very important for me to bring international artists to South Africa. And that's been something I've been absolutely focused on since the beginning. Remember, there have been very few institutions in South Africa 18 years ago. Now there are more, such as Zeitz and Norval. So it's changing. But still, to be able to see an important show by Tavares Strachan in South Africa, in Johannesburg, or Gada Amir will be now in the Cape Town Gallery, is hugely important to broadening perspectives of collectors with regards to contemporary art, and seeing artists from major artists from different countries around the world and seeing their work in South Africa. Also for the art communities, not only for collectors. So building the ecosystem in a robust way, I think it's necessary. So younger artists being given the opportunity to show in our spaces in London or in New York, and bringing their work to the attention of the curators who don't often have the opportunity to travel so far to South Africa. They may come once or twice, but to keep up with everything, that this gives real visibility to artists in the program, and has really made a big difference in those artists being seen and going on to have institutional shows. And that's something I'm very proud of.
You can be.
You can build an artist's career in London and New York much more easily than you can if they don't get the opportunity to be seen in those centers. And so that was the key driver.
Do you think it's unfair that it's harder to build a career for an artist when you're not at the center of the market?
It is. It is. It's tough, right? It is tough.
I had hoped that with digital tools and the expansion of digital sales, it would be easier. But building the trust is about being seen and seen again in the streets where people usually go.
That's why I started South South during COVID, which is a website and a central space for galleries from the global south to be seen. I think digital definitely has the opportunity to transform that problem, and to create more visibility. But it does have to be in a trusted, curated space.
And you're bringing this credibility to that platform for sure.
Yes.
The Goodman Gallery has been a recurring exhibitor at Art Basel, and I wanted to have a bit of a zoom on that, like to understand when was the first time that you made it to enter Art Basel and how do you enter Art Basel?
Goodman Gallery was accepted into Art Basel in 1982. So the first gallery from the African continent. We've been there for many years now. I'm very privileged to be there. And of course, now many more galleries from the African continent are accepted into the various Basels and Frieze, and that's extraordinary to see. So, yeah, Basel is incredible. It really is a privilege every single year to be accepted back. And I don't take that for granted because the quality of the work and the quality of the dealers and the artists is exceptional. And it almost is an opportunity to know that you're going to see everything great. It really is my favorite place to ever go is to go to Basel in June.
And in 2024, your booth was named as one of the top 10 booths at Art Basel. So I wanted to have an understanding of why do you think that here?
I
The
can't
emotion.
remember what we showed on 2024. That's You're going to have to remind me.
I don't have
There's so many art fairs. One art fair just rolls into the
yeah,
next.
yeah, probably. Okay, so just then more generally, how do you create a good booth? And if you have some tips on what emotion do you want to create, what's the curatorial concept?
Yes.
Yeah, how do you make sure works are talking to another? Like, do you have a recipe
That is a skill that you get better at every time you do
by
it
experience?
by experience. Often, you might have a whole group of amazing artworks, but then they don't work with one another, so you can't show them together. So again, it's a combination of skills and experience that helps one be able to create a good booth. And of course, it's dependent on what the artist is making. It's not a factory. An artist is not so you don't know what they're making and what's going to be in the studio. And often you're not sure right until the end. And so a lot of time is spent on curating booths and putting inventory together that can talk to one another. A lot of time. It takes hours of my day. And we plan everything and do SketchUps and models to really see visually that the works can talk to each other. And there's often at least 5, 6, 7 versions that happen to really get to a booth that one feels proud of and feels is the best representation of the gallery at that particular moment in time with what one has. We make models of the booth, and sometimes we particularly will ask artists for work and keep them for a year because we're looking to curate a specific concept. And then we will specifically look for work that talks to a curatorial concept that we really want to create for a particular fair. So it does happen that way, where we really think, wow, it would be amazing to do a show on X and then work to try and find artworks that would fit.
Interesting. So one work can actually start the concept of a
The
whole
whole
booth.
booth.
One thing that I also found unconventional on your website is that I found a short article mentioning that you were at Art Basel, one of the best booths, etc., where there was a transparency about the price of the works that you sold. And this I found unconventional in the gallery world. So I wanted to have a bit your approach on pricing strategy and price transparency. How do you approach that in the art world?
I think that they there is a lot of pressure to do market reporting at the fairs in terms of did you sell, what did you sell, what were the prices. I don't always give prices. I prefer often not to give prices, but rather a range. It seems to be what the standard in the art world is. But I also think it's great to be transparent, at certain times. And if it makes sense to build confidence in a particular artist, to show that the artist is selling at these prices. So I don't often, but I sometimes do.
It's interesting because I found that unconventional. So it's interesting to know that it depends on the context. I had conversations with artists from the African continent, even from other part of the world that are a bit further, like South America or Southeast Asia, that are not the center of the market. And often artists say how difficult it is to price their works to keep a local market while trying to reach international collectors. Do you also feel this tension with artists from the global south, where you want to still be affordable, or at least in prices that collectors from the global south can collect, while bringing artists to the international and more Basel crowd?
Yes, definitely. And I think that it's really important that one is able to, pricing must be very gradual. And I think that ensuring that an artist has major exhibitions or publications or is in serious collections, that should be the only reason to start increasing prices. That's defensible. And I think it needs to be very incremental and rather to build that extremely slowly. I think too many young artists, the prices are raised too quickly, and then there's nothing of substance to hold those prices and to maintain an artist's career. So I'm very reluctant that artists sort of increase their prices too quickly. They really need the institutional support. They really need the major collections and institutions behind them to justify price increases. There is a period in an artist's life or time where they feel too cheap on the international market, and because you're pricing them still in your local currency and trying to build a good collector base for them in your local market. And I think that's okay. I think there becomes an obvious moment once there's enough real credibility and provenance and shows and biennales behind their name, where one then, and good luck to the collectors who bought them at reasonable prices on the way up and supported those artists. But again, it's a balance. It's a very important balance.
What I hear is that it's okay to feel that your prices are cheap at an
Yes,
international level for a while.
yes,
It's better to feel that for a while
yes,
rather than
definitely. Rather
raising
than
up
to
too
increase your
quickly.
prices too quickly, too much, because you can never recover from that. And we've seen that in the latest contemporary art market readjustment, which I think we've just come through. And we saw in Paris just a shift and an upward trajectory now. But certainly there was a reset over the last 2 years, because I think a lot of the younger artists and the contemporary artists, the prices were overinflated, and that was irresponsible of the gallerists and the artists. You want to build confidence, and you want to ensure that artists have a long-term career.
And when you say wait a bit, you mean in years, or we're talking
Yes,
years?
in years.
Okay.
There's no harm for an artist's work to be priced at a lower price, even though they may have one work in MoMA and the Met and the Tate. That doesn't give a reason that they should now be artists that are $1 million or $500,000. Maybe they're still at $20,000, and just build slowly and responsibly.
Good transition to when you were mentioning what happened at Basel in Paris. I wanted to ask to take a bit of a step back on the art market, and maybe how do you perceive its evolution post pandemic? What are the main evolutions of the art market in the last years?
So I think it's for very many reasons all coming together. There's the combination of the digital and physical that's come into play, where people don't feel that they have to physically be anywhere anymore, and you can WhatsApp them or they can access art, via digital tools. I think there's obviously been a reset from an economic perspective in terms of the contemporary art market that was overinflated, and people moving back towards really ensuring value, artists that are truly in art history, that they really have a strong confidence in, and of course the modern masters. But we're back where, and then younger, where they felt that the younger sort of under $50,000 price point was where people felt comfortable. Below sort of 30, 40, $50,000, and the real historical artists, no matter what price that was. There's been a reset, and I think it's been good. The art market needed it. So I think it's been extremely positive. It also creates great opportunity. So we also saw it as a place where collectors really have been brilliant and seen the responsibility and, seen the opportunity, I should say, in being able to acquire great things with artists that have got some very substantial, significant backing behind them with regards to curators and institutions, and feeling like they can be part of something again.
Interesting. There was a reset, so now let's see what's coming next. Indeed.
Absolutely.
Maybe for like the last part of this interview, I would like to have your advice for artists. Especially I wanted to hear you on what makes a good gallerist-artist relation.
I think good relationships are built on trust, first and foremost, and radical honesty and a shared value system. I think this really ensures a partnership that's sustainable and feels positive for the long run. I think you've got to be uncompromising with your vision as an artist and not be controlled by the gallerist forcing you to kind of make work for the market. That's also really, I think, important. If an artist doesn't feel that their creativity and their spirit can be fulfilled or recognized in a relationship with a gallery, I think that it starts to erode the partnership and the relationship. And you've got to pay your artists immediately as soon as you pay them. You can't also not. So we're very strict. The same month that we get paid, we pay our artists. And I think that is very important, not to take advantage of artists financially and let them wait for money and roll your gallery. And we're seeing a lot of that. And I find that something that is clearly not okay.
That's supporting the trust that you were mentioning. That is fundamental. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And did one artist transform your way of working?
I think there are a number, and I think that's the part that still keeps me going as a gallerist today, is the privilege of working with artists that change me for the better, that help me open my mind and expand my views on things and shift me. There are many. The list is not wrong. Honestly, I feel so privileged with the artists that I work with. I learn from them all the time, and that is the best part of what I do. I work with really incredible souls, and they are actually the energy of this gallery. They are this gallery.
Now, you've been repeating that a lot, so we can feel the authenticity in the way that you're really drawn by what you see and the relationship with your artist. Thank you very much, Liza. You've been very generous with your time.
Sure.
And I wish you the best of luck and great encounters and discovery in the art world. I hope that you liked this episode and that you got concrete insights for your personal journey. Follow us on YouTube or your favorite audio platforms to be updated of my next talks with other art market insiders. Goodbye.